Imagine it is 3 in the morning. You are wide awake. Your heart is pounding. Mainstream society tells you something is wrong with you. They diagnose you with a disorder. They prescribe you expensive pills. They spend $87 billion globally every single year convincing you that you are broken. They have normalized the 8-hour unbreakable block of sleep as the human standard. But what if I told you this norm is a modern forgery? What if I told you that you are not experiencing a disease, but rather a powerful, haunting echo of the old world? For thousands of years, a single phrase appeared over 2,000 times in ancient records, from the epic works of Homer to the gritty court depositions of London. A phrase so ordinary it required no explanation. It was called first sleep. In 1697, a 9-year-old girl named Jane Roth stood in a London courtroom and testified casually about her mother waking up after her first sleep. In 12 languages, spanning centuries, this pattern was human default. You slept for roughly 3.5 hours. You woke naturally sometime after midnight for the watch, a sacred, calm interval, and then you returned for your second sleep until dawn. Then, around the year 1820, it completely vanished. They did not just change our schedules. They erased the very language we used to describe our reality. Why was an entire dimension of the human experience quietly removed from historical vocabulary? Why did they rewrite the way human beings exist in the dark? The man who finally noticed this massive linguistic and biological deletion was a Roger E. Kirk, a history professor at Virginia Tech. In the 1990s, while researching nighttime culture before the Industrial Revolution, he stumbled upon that court record from 1697, where 9-year-old Jane Roth casually mentioned the first sleep to a London judge. E. Kirk had never encountered the term. When he started digging, a floodgate of hidden history opened. He found over 2,000 references across 12 languages, spanning from ancient Greece to the early 20th century. This was not some regional oddity. This was the dominant way human beings operated before our old world heritage was systematically dismantled. People retired between 9 and 10 in the evening. They slept for roughly 3.5 hours. Then they woke, naturally, sometime after midnight. They stayed awake for an hour, sometimes 2, in a period known as the watch. Then they returned to bed for the second sleep until dawn. The physical evidence of this suppressed biological cycle is overwhelming, heavily documented long before history was deliberately falsified. The Latin term was primus somnus, in French, premier sommeil, in Italian, primo sonno. Thucydides wrote of it during the Peloponnesian War. Julius Caesar's military commanders referenced prima nox when timing their nighttime attacks. Livy, Cicero, Pliny the Elder, and Apuleius all documented it. The works of Homer, Virgil, and Chaucer treated it as absolute fact. A French priest visiting Brazil in 1555 recorded that the Tupinamba Indians ate during the night after their first sleep. The Asante and Fanti peoples of West Africa had their own phrase in the Tishi language. Surinamese Maroons and Australian Aboriginal communities practiced it. This was not a European habit. This was a universal human trait. During the watch, people were not tossing and turning in anxiety. They prayed, read by candlelight, and visited neighbors in the dark. A 16th-century French physician named Laurent Joubert recommended couples conceive after the first sleep, writing they would have more enjoyment and do it better. A medieval English ballad casually instructs, "At the wakening of your first sleep, you shall have a hot drink made." But we must ask the deeper question, why was this intimate, highly conscious hour targeted for erasure? What were they thinking, planning, and discussing during the midnight watch? It was during these clear, uninterrupted hours of the night that the true old-world story was passed down through oral tradition. Before the controllers took over, humanity shared a collective memory of erased civilizations like Tartaria. They whispered of intricate underground cities and a worldwide hydraulic power grid that once provided free energy to all. They shared terrifying tales of the years after 536 AD, when the world went dark, and passed down the secrets of an era when America had no banks. In 1992, a psychiatrist named Thomas Ware ran a groundbreaking experiment at the National Institute of Mental Health outside Washington. He stripped away every trace of artificial light, placing 14 healthy adults in complete darkness for 14 hours each day for 4 full weeks. No screens, no lamps, no clocks. For the first few nights, they slept 11 hours straight, repaying a massive sleep debt. But by the 4th week, a hidden biological system reactivated. Every single subject settled into the exact same rhythm, 3 to 5 hours of sleep, followed by 1 to 2 hours of profound wakefulness, then another 3 to 5 hours of sleep, biphasic sleep. Weir measured their hormones during that midnight waking interval. Prolactin, the hormone associated with deep relaxation in nursing mothers, surged to twice its normal waking level. The subjects reported a state of profound, almost weightless calm, a state that modern meditation retreats charge thousands of dollars to simulate. Weir concluded that what meditators seek today is a state our ancestors considered their birthright, a nightly occurrence. For thousands of years, every human being entered a chemically distinct state of consciousness for an hour each night, a state that cost nothing. And then, the architects of our modern reality realized that a population connected to a higher consciousness, a population that remembered the giant children and the last living giants of a bygone era, could not be easily controlled. The natural human operating system was fundamentally incompatible with their grand design, so they decided to change the human machine itself. Now, the skeptic in you needs to address something real. In 2015, a team led by Jerome Siegel at UCL studied 3 modern hunter-gatherer societies, the Hadza in Tanzania, the San in Namibia, and the Tsiman in Bolivia. These groups had no electricity, no factory schedules, and no artificial light beyond campfires. If biphasic sleep were the universal human default, they should show it clearly, but they did not. All 3 groups slept in one continuous block, averaging roughly 6.5 hours. Siegel's team argued that biphasic sleep was never a global birthright, but merely a regional adaptation to higher latitudes with long winter nights. E. Kirch fired back in the scientific journal Sleep. He cited documented evidence of biphasic patterns among equatorial cultures that Siegel never examined, including the Tupinamba, the Asante, we people of southern Africa. The academic debate is genuinely unresolved, but what nobody disputes is this: wherever the sacred first sleep existed, it vanished in response to the exact same unseen forces, and those forces had absolutely nothing to do with human biology. Follow the money, and watch the timeline of how history was deliberately falsified. In 1807, London installed gas streetlights. By 1823, nearly 40,000 lamps illuminated over 200 miles of London streets. In the United States, 300 municipalities had street lamps by 1860. Artificial light pushed bedtimes later, compressing sleep into a single block. The watch shrank, the second sleep shortened. But lighting alone did not kill biphasic sleep. The architects of our current reality killed it. Why the sudden, coordinated push to illuminate the night? It was an orchestrated campaign to sever our connection to the dark, the very space where the old world story thrived in spoken word. Think about the suppressed technology of the era. The famous 124-year bulb that still burns today proves they had advanced, lasting technology, yet they forced a fragile, dependent power grid upon us. They were busy resetting reality in the shadows. In 1855, they physically raised the entire city of Chicago on hydraulic jacks, burying the original first floors. In 1863, a modern financial system gripped a nation, effectively erasing the era when America had no banks. And by the time of the missing 1890 census, the ultimate cover-up was complete. They destroyed the missing 1890 records to hide the evidence of population resets, the giant children, the last living giants, and the remnants of the Tartaria Empire. By the year 1900, the Smithsonian was actively hiding anomalous artifacts of our true lineage. Industry was their weapon. In the 1830s, a psychological operation known as the Early Rising Movement swept through Britain and the United States. E. Kirch describes how the urban middle class began adopting the cold values of industrialization, ambition, efficiency, punctuality, and profit. Factory owners needed synchronized labor. They needed workers who arrived at the exact same hour and worked grueling 10 to 14-hour shifts. They needed compliant employees who went home exhausted enough to collapse into one unbroken block of sleep. The two-sleep pattern was completely incompatible with that system of control. So, the system eliminated it. By the 1820s, parenting manuals officially instructed mothers to wean children off biphasic sleep, not because physicians said it was unhealthy, but because consolidated sleep produced more reliable, unquestioning workers. In 1787, a man named Levi Hutchins in New Hampshire built the first mechanical alarm clock. He did not build it to escape danger. He built it to wake himself for work. That single device marks the exact moment human sleep stopped belonging to biology and started answering to capital. And then a strange new profession appeared that tells the whole story. In industrial Britain, workers who could not afford clocks hired people called knocker-uppers. These were men and women who walked dark streets at 3 and 4 in the morning. They carried long bamboo poles and tapped on bedroom windows to drag factory workers out of their natural sleep. A London knocker-upper named Mary Smith became famous for her bizarre technique. She used a pea shooter to fire dried peas at upper-story windows. She charged sixpence a week, and her daughter, Molly, eventually inherited the job. The profession survived well into the 1920s, even after cheap alarm clocks became widely available. Some workers simply trusted a human face at the window more than a machine on the nightstand. Think about that. An entire paid industry existed for over a century with the sole purpose of wrenching human beings out of their natural sleep cycle. The knocker-upper is the fossil record of biological coercion. It marks the space between how your body wants to sleep and how a hidden industry demanded you sleep. You have been told since childhood that 8 hours of unbroken sleep is normal, but that norm is younger than the telegraph. It is younger than photography. It is a fabricated product of gas lamps, factory whistles, and manuals written to serve industrial output. The global sleep aid market was valued at roughly $87 billion in the year 2024. The insomnia drug market alone approaches $4 billion. In the United States, between 50 and 70 million people report insomnia symptoms every year. The single most common complaint: waking at 2 in the morning, diagnosed, medicated, billed. Professor Akirch believes you are not broken. You are experiencing a powerful echo of our erased history. Tonight, your body may naturally wake after the first sleep, but instead of entering the watch, you will reach for your phone. Blue light will flood your retinas. Cortisol will spike. Anxiety will follow. Tomorrow, a doctor will write a prescription for a condition that a 16th century physician would have casually called a regular Tuesday night. The erasure was entirely linguistic. The phrase first sleep appeared continuously in English from the 1300s through the early 1800s. By the 1920s, it was scrubbed from common vocabulary entirely. When you delete a word, you delete the idea. You cannot question a pattern you have no language to describe, and you cannot demand back a reality you cannot name. 2,000 references in 12 languages sit in the public record right now. The evidence is not hidden. It is published, cited, and reviewed by peers. What if the thing waking you at 2 in the morning is not a stress response, but the oldest clock you own, still ticking despite 2 centuries of forced rewiring? We traded a basic feature of human consciousness for factory whistles, and now we pay an $87 billion industry to drug us back to sleep. If we were sleeping correctly the entire time, what else about our reality is a lie?